Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to this afternoon's session. I'd like to acknowledge that we've come together on the traditional lands of the Yugambeh language group today, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders members of the panel and any that we might have in the audience with us today. So I'm Mag Scholes. I'm here talking about being in Queensland. So I'm the principal of a newly established regional production company called Beige Radio Pictures. Previously, I was head of content at Screen Queensland, and prior to that, I was head of international production at BAFTA-winning company in Singapore and London. So it's pretty early days at Beige Radio. We're taking on board what Deirdre said yesterday in her chat with Matt about looking globally and being internationally discoverable. So as a team, we're having head of Meta's Creative Shop Asia Pacific join us, and also head of Social Good, Diversity, Equity and Inclusion and Women's Programs. Amongst the team we're bringing together, we've previously had some success. We've opened the UN Climate Change Conference in New York. We've made a production which has led to the first sacking of a bishop by the Vatican, and also we've had an Emmy nomination for a WebEx series that we did for most outstanding digital innovation for a project, an experience that we did with the International Paralympic Committee. So we're truly trying to be regional and reaching global. So let's pass over to today's moderator, Dean Gibson. He's on the Screen Queensland board, and he is also the director and producer of Bacon Factory Films. So welcome, Dean.
Thank you. Thank you, Mags. I too would like to take this very moment to acknowledge traditional owners of this country, the Yugambeh people. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that same respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the room. Thank you for coming on a Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock. There's many probably more attractive places you could be at this time of day, but you're here. So thank you for being here, and I hope that we can get something great out of this group of people. I want to keep it pretty relaxed today, and I really want to hear from you all. So you all know I'm going to do the whole thing, but you know the iPad questions and app thing. I'm going to try and do this, rather than saving it for the end, I'm going to try and do it as we go through. So shoot it through straight away if you have a question, and I'll try and pose it as I can straight away, or if not, close to the time with our guests here today. So I guess do we assume we all know who everyone is here and who they work for? Okay, let's move on then. Let's go. I think we do know that, and I think it's important because it's such a big group here that we push straight into it. So let's get to the first question. I just want to get, I guess from all of you, each, can you give me a little snapshot of the commissioning landscape at the moment, the factual commissioning landscape? What, to you now, at a really top high level, what would you consider the factual state of the nation in terms of our industry? Amanda? And maybe a little brief introduction about who you represent.
Okay. Thank you. My name's Amanda Duthie. I'm head of Stan Originals. We're here, Stan is here at SPA in full force. Kayla Scobie, Chief Content Officer, myself, and two commissioning editors, Alicia Brown and Donna Chang. And between the three of us, myself, Donna and Alicia, we're across the whole slate of Stan Originals. So that includes half hour, 1 hour and feature fiction, feature documentaries, documentary series, entertainment, sport and kids. And I wish I had a whole bag of mics that I could drop, but we did announce 25 titles last week, so I'm going to be banging on a lot about some of those titles. And the factual slate for Stan includes feature docs and entertainment and sport offerings, and I can go into those in a little bit more detail later. But in terms of the state of the nation, I think that, from being involved, but also from a humble distance as an audience member, it feels very healthy at the moment. I think that there are opportunities in fiction and non-fiction of being able to explore international partnerships across all those different formats and getting our stories out into the world, and also collaborating with global players to sort of enhance or supersize our work. So I'll hand it along the line.
Marissa?
Yuri Marang. Good day, everybody. I'm Marissa, head of commissions NITV. I guess for us at NITV, we commission a number of for a number of different, genres, factual, scripted. I also do animation as well. But in the factual space for us, I mean, we're looking for those kind of stories that are universal, but also told from a First Nations perspective. And I think the state of the filmmaking kind of documentary space at the moment, I think we have a lot of stories to tell, but we're looking for those really rich stories at the moment. And I think we're not getting pitched enough of those at the present moment, and looking for those unique ins to story.
So are you wanting me to comment on the state of factual more broadly, or for SBS, or both? Because they're two very different things. No.
Well, let's go, touch on both if you want.
I think I actually feel, despite it being Wednesday, 4:00, very vital about how unscripted is at SBS. I think the reason I feel that is that I think, are in a constant state of reinvention. I think many broadcasters have many staples that they go back to year after year. And we have a couple of those, and they're really valuable. They give a kind of anchor point in the schedule. But where I think it's great for you people in the room and for us at SBS is we are constantly looking for the new, constantly looking for the what next, constantly looking for the game changer. And I think that's actually really quite exciting state of play within SBS. We're very much actively developing out there, so it's not a kind of closed shop at all. More broadly, though, I do think things are tough when I look out at the industry there. I do think it is, increasingly shrinking audiences that are out there and us trying to reach them across many, many different platforms. So I think for the producer out there, it's certainly kind of tough times ahead in certain ways, but I would say there are the opportunities at SBS.
Look, I mean, not too dissimilar from what's already been said. I mean, I think, just as way of introduction, Kelrick Martin, head of the ABC's Indigenous department, Ngullama man from northwestern WA. Look, I tend to agree. Like, I think outside of, within our walls at the ABC's Indigenous department, like, we have a very specific remit. We want First Nations people to be in control and celebrate and tell their stories through the national broadcaster. And I think what's really important for us is very much about impact, stories that have massive impact for a nation. We want people who hear our stories or to see the documentaries that we have through ABC Indigenous to learn and have a better understanding of First Nations people. That's our broader remit for those stories as well. And, the Dark Emu story, First Weapons, we've had some incredible outcomes last year for our factual slate. More broadly, I think, there's always going to be challenges with the First Nations space because there are so few First Nations creators out there who have the ability to step straight into a production-ready project and to activate the outcomes of that project. So, people who work in the scripted space often do cross over into the factual space and vice versa, and good First Nations creatives are very, very hard to find. So for us at ABC Indigenous, it's a really tough journey to try and make sure that we have people who can step into those roles and to be involved in those projects. Having said that, AIDC was 2 weeks ago. Their Indigenous Creators Program was incredible, and I'm always dubious every year when we go to AIDC for this program. So I think, are there really going to be new Indigenous faces coming through? Are there really opportunities there? And I'm always proven wrong. There was at least a dozen new Indigenous creators at that program who were incredible, bright, young, enthusiastic content makers. So for me, I feel like the future's very bright.
And hello, I'm Susie Jones. I'm relatively new as the head of factual at ABC. And the great joy of going last is that I can sort of agree with everything that's been said. I do think it is optimistic. I think it probably is never not a period of change in the factual sector. I think obviously we're in a period where we are trying to transition audiences from linear to streaming, which comes with challenges, but also opportunity. I think there's obviously more competition for eyeballs, and audiences are more sophisticated and discerning than ever. So I think that is a challenge in that it pushes us all to be innovative with form and how we tell these stories. But I think that's an opportunity. You know, it's a challenge and an opportunity. And I think I look at how things are in the UK at the moment, and I feel like we're not doing so badly. Like, you know, there is opportunity here. We're not too buffeted by the forces that are affecting them. And so we can make hay while the sun shines. And with those challenges that other markets are facing come opportunities for us to get our content out onto the world and to perhaps form new partnerships that we haven't before.
And Susie, you're 8 months into the role. You've had a chance to look inside the bonnet and see things and understand how it works. Can you talk to us a bit about the strategy and what you're thinking in terms of where you want to take this ship and how you work, the process of your team and yourself?
Yeah, sure. I feel very fortunate because I've come into a really great team. I think, as to the point earlier, it has been a big period of change for the ABC in terms of a restructure, and with that comes a little bit of time before the dust settles. But I've been fortunate to inherit a really strong team who've come from various departments. And inherit a bunch of great shows that are either on air or in development or in production right now, and they're all really strong. I've been fortunate to inherit Muster Dogs from the regional and local team, and it went gangbusters out of the gates. We sort of had a really strong start to the year in terms of our factual content. We've got some very exciting new shows coming through that I can't wait to share with Australian audiences. Stuff the Brits Stole, Better Date Than Ever's out now on air, and it's a great example of a show that is really built for a streaming audience but can work on linear as well, and it's got so much heart and it's so beautiful. I think, I'm still 8 months in, I'm working with a team on evolving the strategy and working with the broader ABC about where we go from here. It's not sort of reinventing the wheel or throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We want more of what's been working for us, and those are those really important national conversations that can reach a broad audience. I think more than ever, form is really important with that because, as I said, I think audiences have so much to choose from. Why would they come to one of our shows? And I think more than ever it's important, and this is probably where I would like to take us, is to make sure we're led by our heart and the story, and that of course there are the thematics after it, but it doesn't feel didactic, it doesn't feel like homework, it's something that is going to engage you, pull an audience in. I'd love to see a younger audience come to the ABC, I think we all would, and that's not about, when I say young, it's not 20s necessarily, although that would be lovely. It's sort of 30 to 60, that range, and I think we can be the home of factual content that appeals to that audience. I think the ABC is making world-class factual content that punches above its weight. We just want more of that, and to broaden out the sort of, perhaps focus on some genres that we know appeal to those audiences more as well.
Is that code for quality over quantity?
Yeah, it is. I think I think the ABC, it has to be everything to everybody, right? We're trying to do a lot of things. Chris said a great line, maybe it's not everything for everybody, but something for everybody. And so making sure when we commit to something, we put the full weight of the ABC behind it, because it's really impressive when you've got an incredible news team and these brilliant journalists and social teams and podcasts. So we're really trying to work more collaboratively. So when we do, it can be a little bit of a harder bar to get your project into development now, but when we do and when we come on board, you get sort of the weight of all of us. It's more exciting next door.
Yeah, no showreels here, sadly. Can I talk about your audiences? And I think, Amanda, given that you're in a commercial space, it's important. You must have a really clear understanding about who your audience is, because it depends on your survival. So, can you talk a bit about the people who watch your network and the kind of programs that tailor that?
Yep. Clearly it's the combination of the incredible acquisitions that we've got on platform as well as the Stan Originals. The general age of Stan audiences is probably a whole lot younger than free-to-air and public broadcasting. I think that's fair to say. And because of the nature of it being available all the time, it's a streamer environment, that we can be providing, showcasing work that sort of speaks to different areas of the audience all the time. We're not sort of cornered by, a 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. program schedule. And then where we drop programs, whether it's box set or weekly, it really depends on the genre, that sort of creating new watching patterns and rhythm methods for the audiences. But, we clearly can see what works, and we have a number of returning series, especially in Unscripted. And in terms of factual, clearly the Drag Race universe works incredibly well. We're up to series 4 now. We've been delighted to be able to announce Michelle Visage as the host for Drag Race Down Under. So that sort of gives a fresh take to that format. And we're rolling out a whole lot of feature documentaries because we saw that there was sort of an absence of those in the local market, but also knew that documentaries are absolutely catnip to audiences of all ages, of all diversity, and so I think we've got currently 6 on platform, with another 7 rolling out over the next little while. And, when we're looking at curating the slate, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, there are clearly certain themes or areas of interest that are going to appeal to a broad audience. Whether it's celebrity or, a bigger social issue or crime, we're sort of looking through the different lenses to see what we're commissioning across the feature docs.
In the last sort of year since we last were here, what worked for you and why?
The originals continue to absolutely deliver for audience. They're consistently in the most viewed in the top 15 programs or titles. 7 of those are Stan originals, and it's very clearly demonstrated that Australian audiences love seeing those feature documentaries. Whether it's a biopic of Danielle Laidley or neo-Nazis, Ben Roberts-Smith, all of these things are clearly topical. They're important, but also they have the rigour and agency of being led by incredible journalists. And being part of that broader 9 family, we can shop our own collection. I've got incredible journalists working across The Age and Sydney Morning Herald and 60 Minutes. So, we haven't delivered them all yet. I think the 4th one is about to come down the line, but we've done 4 films with Nick McKenzie. We've done a film with John Sylvester from The Age, and that's not me. And we're about to launch a film called How to Poison a Planet with Carrie Fellner. And most of them have international elements, whether it's filming or talent. So they're consistently delivering for audiences.
And do production companies, outside production companies, come in and work with your pool of talent, or how does that work?
The majority are sort of, they look and smell like a regular commission. It's state agency, it's sometimes Screen Australia. We bring on international distribution if it's required, local distribution, and we pay a license fee and equity if that's required. With the internal documentaries, we've made 3. 2 of those have been, all 3 of them have been working with independent producer directors. So it's a way of, having having those internal documentaries as well as the majority of external full commissions working with the independent sector.
Joseph, how do you talk about acquisitions and commissioning? How much do you and your team commission and acquire in a year? Like, give us an understanding of the kind of quantity of work that you want to get through in a year.
Absolutely. I just want to say one interesting thing about the single doc strand that you've got and that we've got and now ABC are having. I think there's one thing that we see is really powerful with that. So I'm riffing off a different point, but What's really interesting for us is often a scheduler will want a kind of clarity of we want this consistency within the schedule. What this collection of single docs allow us, certainly from an SBS point of view, I don't know if it's the same for you, is you go, actually, there's a real broad reach with that, because certain people will come for that, other people will come for that, and actually that's a really interesting play for us to be able to experiment and have greater diversity within it. Other times, of course, we want that consistency, but so it works incredibly well for us on that front. And with that does come some unpredictability. I mean, some of them performed really well, some of them less so, but that reach is a really important factor. So I just wanted to say the importance of that within our schedule. In terms of acquisitions of how we work with them, I mean, we are driven, it's pretty much about 90% acquisitions, SBS. So they are the real driver. They actually do give much more than we do, the consistency. And so I put a huge pressure on ourselves, an expectation on ourselves that our commissions should really punch through above and beyond the schedule and on demand. And it is quite interesting, like, whenever we do the sort of top 10 shows of the year, commissions, despite making only about 10% of the schedule, make up about sort of normally around 4 or 5 or 6 of those top 10 shows. So they really do work with it. But then we also try and work out how we can play those audiences together. So, and this is people much more strategic and clever than me. We were very clear that when we launched a big show like Alone, we would then drive them on to Rogue Heroes. So you get a kind of double success of trying to kind of where we can get our acquisitions to kind of find the similar audiences to our commissions and vice versa.
Was Alone, was that a risk? Do you think that was a risk for SBS, or were you going in nervous into that process? And
yeah, I mean, it's funny. I know some people think it wasn't a risk, but I cannot tell you how terrified I was, genuinely. And I genuinely believe it's a huge risk. And I'm so sorry if anyone's heard me talk about Alone and I'm repeating myself, so I'll be brief. But a show that doesn't have an ending, I would say, is quite risky. A show that you can't produce, I'd say, is quite risky. A show you can't direct, I'd say, is quite risky. A show when people are putting their lives on the line out there is quite risky, and that happens in season 2. What we are all is control freaks. I'd say everyone in this room is probably at some level a bit of a control freak. And when you make Alone, you can't do that. Yes, once you're in the edit, of course, you can then work on that. But I would say it's a huge risk. Similarly, what we did know is, yes, it got a big audience on demand, but it didn't have a big linear audience. So with a show like that, yeah, I was genuinely terrified, and now I have got the slight scares of the second season coming of what that will do and whether it will perform similarly well. But it's certainly got the drama.
ABC, Kelrick and Susie from ABC, given the political magnifying glass that ABC is always under and the scrutiny that it sits under, what does risk and courage in your commissioning look like? Like, is that something that you are looking for? You're obviously looking to create content that stands above other things. So, what does that begin to look like, given the environment that you work in and the scrutiny it's under?
I can jump in. Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely want shows that present risk, calculated risk, not just risk for risk's sake, but risk because they're worth telling, or they're difficult stories to tell, or they're not immediately an obvious audience play, but you think that there's something in it that will attract an audience. And so what I've been comforted by, I suppose, is when we've discussed riskier projects, there's an incredible support network within the ABC, so it can sometimes take us a little while longer to go through those steps. So at the moment, we've put a call out for lots of, for true crime. We want to do true crime, but there's such a responsibility for us as the national public broadcaster to get that right, to be ethical about how we do it, to make sure the story is worth, the juice is worth the squeeze, if we're going to put those stories out there. So as soon as we get a true crime pitch, just by way of example, we share it. If we think that it's something that might work with us, we share it immediately with legal and compliance before we bother taking it into development. We have a whole lot of internal processes, and obviously we've got an incredible Ed Polls team led by Simon Melkman. And so there's a lot of sort of layers, but a very collaborative process. I think we've got lots of beautiful warm-hearted shows to come to on our slate, in our factual slate. I think we do also need to tackle some difficult subjects, not in my time, but I remember Revelation made by In Films, and I thought that was brilliant and such an important story for the ABC to tell. So we're certainly on the hunt for shows that are risky by their very nature, that are litigious, that are difficult from a duty of care perspective, but a lot of thought will be put into it before we even get into development.
Sorry, quickly before, Susie, in terms of true crime, are you looking for national staged crimes that are top level sort of across the nation, or is it a localised incidents Like, what are you looking for in terms of the true crime appetite?
I would say both. I would think for us, a true crime story, and then I'll let you, sorry, I've taken up a lot of airtime. We would need a story to have layers. It can't be just a salacious true crime story that's entertaining and interesting. It has to have something to say about who we are as a nation, or something about systemic problems. A la Revelation's a great example. Or we can also be kind of playful with true crime. It sounds counterintuitive, but it could be a fraud or a heist. I look at something like the Whiteley art scandal that was on a few months ago. It was brilliant, again, an in films show, and that was playful, but it was a crime story and an art story and incredible characters, well told, and it was a success. So a range, and we're also open to series in that realm, or also as part of our feature doc strand, which I think it's great that there's so much opportunity now for feature docs. I think they are important in a streaming world. You could bring us a feature doc as well. But again, we'd be looking for those layers and what it says beyond the story itself.
Yeah, what Susie said. So what was the question again?
Well,
Risk.
okay.
Risk. Look, I mean, ABC Indigenous, I think, is incredibly important for us to take risks. Risk is about the possibility of failure. Through failure, you grow, and I think evolution and growing and learning from those experiences is really, really important. I think over the years, there has been a kind of a broader audience ambivalence toward Indigenous content, this idea that it's one flavour, that it's this kind of experience where you go in and you have to sit down, and you have to learn, and you have to be good, and you have to listen, and you have to kind of go on this journey of understanding, blah, 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 blah. It's all very worthy, it's all very dull. And I think that what we're trying to do is to just completely disrupt all that and reset the relationship that we have with our audience and the expectation they have from First Nation stories. We can't have Indigenous being regarded as this kind of genre where Indigenous means you're feeling that way. We have to really challenge our audience with what they're going to get from that journey. And I think for us, what I'm trying to do through our department is to reset that relationship and say, no, we want Indigenous to mean exciting, entertaining, fun, cool, sexy, innovative. And so in order to do that, we have to take risks. We've got a lot of new people coming through, a lot of very ambitious content makers coming through, and in order for us to grow the sector, we have to support those ambitions, and we have to find a way to allow those guys to have an opportunity to have their voice heard. So for me, absolutely, risk is vital. We don't just do it in terms of subject, but also form is a really important area to take risk as well. Last year, end of 22, we commissioned a production company to make an anniversary project for the 50th anniversary of the Aboriginal Tender visit out in Canberra, diving into the ABC's rich archives, going through and retelling the story of what happened in 1972. It could have been a very standard documentary, could have just been a very talking head, very sort of, gentle journey through the archives. No, stuff that. We just told the guys, create an amazing soundtrack, use incredible dynamic animation and title treatments, and just go to town. The guys that were in those revelationary protests were all in their early 20s. So tell it like it's a story from a bunch of early 20-year-olds and just have fun with it. And it did incredibly well for us. So, it's that sort of stuff which I think is really exciting for our sector.
If you look across the room and see the independent and companies and producers here, all of this is for everyone. Do you think we come with as much courage and vigour with our projects? Like, what would you say to us as when we bring a story to you, to think bigger, to stretch your thinking, stretch your imagination? What would you say that you're probably seeing in terms of pictures and ideas, and what would you say that we could work on or consider extending ourselves or getting into new terrain? Who wants to take that one?
Oh, I think there's such an incredible wealth of talent in the Australian production sector, and I think how the production sector is in response to what gets picked up. So I think it's every bit as much on us to set the parameters for what you can pitch us, and I think I'd love to see more, I think from a public broadcaster's perspective, occasionally you get pitched a thematic rather than a story. And I want to be excited by the story, and I expect that there's a whole lot of thought and themes and relevant subject behind it. So that's one thing I would say. And it's I was at Netflix for a year and a half, and it was very much that bring us a story, don't bring us a thematic. And I think it applies to probably all of us because we want to get excited. And then I think commercial not being a dirty word for a public broadcaster as well. I look at the success of the feature docs that have done well on streaming services, and they're commercial. That doesn't mean that they can't have integrity and they can't be really, really well made and have something important to say, but I'd love more of that as well. Sort of, they used a term at Real Screen this year called docbusters. I want docbusters. I want documentaries that sort of do way more than you expect them to do and appeal to a really broad audience who don't even think they like documentaries.
I do agree. I think it is it's symbiotic. If you're not feeling the broadcasters, the streamers are going to take the risks, you're going to bring you're not going to push the limit there. I think we feel a sense of we are open for bigger, bolder shows. And I've got to say, we did a little tally the other day, and it literally is 95 ideas out of 100 are a quick no, or a very early no. So that's how brutal it is out there, the landscape. The ones that cut through have got an extraordinary access, have got a boldness of proposition. And some of those, when we develop, turn out to not pay off enough, and we accept that. But I would throw it out there a bit. I do think there are too many mediocre pitches. I do think there's a kind of room for us to go, we can pitch this bigger, we can pitch this bolder, how can we turn up the dial more? But yes, it's up to us to make sure that then we respond to that, make sure that then there are those shows out there. And I think we've got in development shows that do speak to that. But I would urge everyone, as soon as they've got their pitch, to go, how can we just turn up that dial a bit more? How can we get that scale a bit bigger? Because I think there's certainly an appetite certainly from us, and I would imagine from others.
Yeah, look, for us at NITV, I think looking at those stories that resonate globally, so we're looking at First Nation stories, but that can be told and understood on a global platform as well, but told in a way that's innovative. So looking at, not your stock standard, talking heads in documentary style. It's how are you going to tell that story? What's your ends to that story? And that's what excites us. And we don't get enough of that pitched to us.
And they don't actually always have to be it's not always about scale. We've got a series coming out called I Was Actually There from the team at Docker Media. It's quite a simple, I would argue, not that expensive show. It's just so emotionally engaging. It's just first-person narratives from people who are in extraordinary situations told sort of in, not real time, but, sort of in a... And so there's an example of something that's not... it's not huge in scale, but it's so emotionally engaging that I think it will do really, really well.
Amanda, be honest with us, please. What pitfalls do you see in some pitches, and when people come to you, what are some of the things and what people, producers are potentially missing or getting wrong?
So we receive over 1,000 pitches a year. Most of them are scripted, but I think you can sort of, and I do believe everyone in the room does know what works and what doesn't work. They hear the reasons, but particularly for a streamer, we need content that is going to draw that audience through a paywall. So what is that absolute compelling reason why someone should pick up their subscription and watch this and not watch, other options that might be free to air or available on YouTube. So it must be elevated, and it must have that unique access. Especially with a lot of the biopics that we've been doing, it is about enabling the audience to really come up close and meet with those people in a great deal of detail. I think that if it's issues-based, it's not just about my street, my town, my suburb, my city. It is about what are the global ramifications for that particular issue. We've got a feature documentary coming up soon called How to Poison a Planet with Carrie Fellner exploring forever chemicals, which is an issue not just in particular communities all around Australia, but every country. And it really does blow the lid off, quite frankly, our complete ignorance or lack of engagement with a problem that has been around for decades and decades, but the particular how it impacts certain individuals, that is the total gut punch of this film, and I think it's sort of a testament to what we're looking for, that it is big thinking, but it also touches the hearts as well as the minds. And then there's nothing wrong with something that is broader and lighter, that's something for the family. So we're looking for that. We're looking for that range. But I think you all know what works because you're watching the content on the platform or the broadcaster. You know what is being commissioned, and it's not just by whom or the particular subject. It's the tone, it's the elevation, it's the quality of the work that's going to be on that streamer. So, you know, it's looking at your work in relation to that. And it's not to say to replicate it, because clearly we want to take a fresh risk every time we commission a project. And that's what gets us up in the morning, that's what excites us. That's one of the key elements that we're discussing in our commissioning meetings of why we would bloody die in a ditch for this project, because it is tough to get a commission. You know, 1,000 projects a year, if we're dropping 21 on platform, that is a really significant number of projects that are a pass. And oftentimes you can find projects and there is an element in there that you can respond to, or you can imagine if we did this or added this element, wow, wouldn't that be incredible? But there are more of a number of projects in that middle space. It's the ones that don't leave any question hanging. They're the ones that you absolutely get behind from the get-go.
And the formats, what is format for you? Do you think about that? Is that a big sort of factor in your choices and the way that you sort of drive a project forward in terms of the format of it?
For the feature documentary, sure. It's driven by that filmmaker vision. You know, we have done some series, but they're more sort of sport related. You know, we do relationship shows. We've done Love Triangle. You know, RuPaul is a format unto itself. Yeah, absolutely, it is the director's vision that we're super keen to hear right from the get-go.
And ABC formats?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at a slate, and anyone who's worked at a network knows that, and that is about mitigating risk, that you want a balance of some things that are slightly less risky, others where you need more time to develop them. So we're really open to original formats, and we've got many examples that I can point to: Better Date Than Never, Muster Dogs, some that haven't been announced yet. I would say that I was actually there, will hopefully be a returning format. Stuff the Brits Stole. These are all original Australian formats developed in conjunction with the ABC. Beyond that, we're also really open to amazing international formats, so we can do local versions of stuff like Back in Time for Dinner was a great example of that, or Old People's Home for 4-year-olds. And with that just comes a slight, it's never a guarantee that will work, but there's a slight comfort, and they should be a part of the overall offering, but not the whole offering, is my view.
Joseph, you've had some big formats over your time. Is it an appetite to move forward with more formats? Where does it sit?
Annoyingly, I'll have to agree with the ABC. No, I mean, I think it is a mixed palette. It can't be all one thing or the other. Like, we really value the joy of a beautifully crafted obs doc over a long period of time. We really value certain presenter-led pieces. So it really is a mixed palette. I would say, we look overseas occasionally for, certain formats which really just punch through and think we've got to get them. And sometimes we get them kind of very, very early on. Before they're out on the kind of open market. But absolutely, we want to foster new formats. And we just announced at AIDC a new $50,000 fund for big, bold formats that explore social cohesion and inequality. And the whole point of that is to go, what's the next Go Back to Where You Came From? What's the next First Contact? Those kind of pieces. And I totally believe we've got the capability to deliver those and then sell those overseas. And Another format that we did is Australia, sexist, racist, and various versions of that has now been sold to multiple territories overseas as well. So I think, we would massively support a show that can then be sold back to the world as well. So I think you've got to have that hybrid. And just to be clear, I think certain broadcasters might go to an international format because it doesn't have so much risk. I think that's less so for us. I think it's more, it hits a really specific need that we've got and really feels distinctive for us, rather than, it's got a safety in numbers.
Can I just quickly remind everyone that please send your questions on the app. I will read them out as they come through, because I want to make sure that you all get a chance to ask questions. I've got one here. It says, what is the appetite for science and tech content in today's market?
I know who asked that. It's the man in that spectacular coat. Where's he gone? He might have left. He's a science producer. We're really, up for science and tech content at the ABC. We do have an internal strand, Catalyst, that's sort of undergoing some changes at the moment. So above and beyond that, it'd have to be something that is a different offering for the audience. I think, again, in this time where we're transitioning between linear to streaming, the challenge with linear is that it has to usually be a fairly broad offering. I think in a time in the future when we're more, the audience is more streaming, then you can perhaps lean into specialists even more so, is my gut instinct, unproven. But there's definitely opportunities there.
Marissa, how did NITV come out of the wash of the referendum conversation? Like, how did you as a network talk to that, and what sort of came out of that wash of the referendum?
Look, I guess speaking and more broadly, I guess for NITV, we're impartial, being a broadcaster, to the yes and no vote, and just getting, the material out to people as best as we could, to service the nation itself. On the back end of that, I guess, now I think we're recharged, ready, to go back out and just to tell our stories from that authentic, our perspective. I think there's a fire in our belly now, and the importance of that, through all of our platforms, through internal productions, news and commissions, and even our acquisitions as well, just really pushing our stories and our voices and choosing that content that really represents us authentically is important to us now.
Can you explain to us who might not be familiar the importance of language on your network? And you just been to New Zealand. Can you talk a bit about that too?
So I just got back from the World Indigenous Television broadcast gathering over in New Zealand, where we had a number of First Nations broadcasters from across the country. A number of them, they all speak in their own language, and I think coming off the back of that, I think it just enforces how important it is for First Nation languages to be used, wherever possible, through our interviews as newsreaders, in our acquisitions. So anything that we acquire, where's our language being seen, and especially for our young ones too. I think because we have that revitalisation of some languages that were sleeping. I don't like to say lost. I think it's really important for us to continue our language. And to keep that revitalisation going, and just on a global sort of scale, just seeing what the rest of the world's doing, just enforces the importance off the back of coming back from New Zealand on that trip.
Kelrick, do you much language on ABC out of interest?
Yeah, look, the ABC has embraced language, not just for First Nations projects and programs, but also for our mainstream content as well. Through our relationship with Reconciliation Australia, our Reconciliation Action Plan, our Elevate RAP has been in place for a number of years now, and a primary outcome of that RAP is to normalise the use of First Nations language, particularly around place names, and to include it in as much of our content as possible. So if you watch Landline or Backroads or any of those shows, and we have the reporters reporting from particular areas, you will invariably see the traditional place name as the identifier for that location, and that's just the very beginning of the journey that the ABC is going on. We really think that our platform and our reach and our relationship with our audience is incredibly important to facilitate just a revitalisation and support of the use of Indigenous languages from here on in. The Indigenous language is not specific to just Aboriginal people. I think that we really see Indigenous language, while obviously being culturally connected to particular language groups and particular families, something that all Australians can embrace and use. I mean, let's face it, it's already being used already. How many place names are out there that are already First Nations place names? We just don't even know it, right?
And Joseph, multicultural language.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, all of our commissions, we have subtitled into 5 different, at least, the 5 most popular languages. I totally agree. I would actually really commend things like, I've noticed certainly on Network 10, and it might be elsewhere, like place names across all the networks being acknowledged, and the country that you're on being acknowledged. So it does feel, incredibly important to us and sort of incredibly obvious that we should be doing it. You would hope SBS and the ABC would do that anyway. I think it's great when you see other networks also doing that. I think that's when you see a bit of sign of progress.
I just want to follow that really quickly. Like the AFL and the embrace of place name for the football clubs, was it last year or even this year? I can't remember how many years it goes back. I just think about that example of the Melbourne Football Club, and they're changing their name to NAM for that particular round. Prior to that round, I imagine no Melbourneite would have any idea of what the traditional place name is for Melbourne. After that round, I can guarantee everyone knew that NAM was the traditional name for Melbourne.
Globally, what's catching your eye, Amanda? Is there things that you're seeing across the globe that you're taking interest on, and what things are you sort of seeing that you could think point local producers towards?
Where do I start? Where do I end? I think that there is a broader appetite for directorial-led storytelling. There is a growing desire for feature documentaries. Clearly, the relationship format is going incredibly well. It probably sits more in the free-to-air space, but we've had a lot of fun making Love Triangle, which I think is sort of a streamer version of that relationship format. There is so much content, and I think that the other thing I would sort of observe is how important the marketing and the PR and that monster truck to be able to draw people's attention to the work that you have, whether it's on your platform or your schedule. That's just becoming more and more important to be able to sort of draw in new audiences.
What else is catching everyone's eyes or attention?
Probably the same things that caught a lot of people's, and I'd love for the next ABC series or doco to be the thing that everybody's talking about. So, I mean, Jury Duty I thought was really compelling. I'd say it's still a factual form, even though a lot of it was scripted. I thought it was innovative. I think the way that there's 2 companies, Raw in the UK and Story Syndicate in the US, who are really clever with form. So they often they are true crime stories, not always, but they're just very clever with how they structure the stories, and I'd love to see more of that in our docos. Story Syndicate also said that whenever they get a pitch, they think about it. A documentary pitch, they think about it in scripted terms. Are there enough twists and turns? Are the characters big enough? How will this sustain? I think that's really clever thinking. And then I loved, probably like everybody else, or maybe not everybody, I really enjoyed the Beckham series, and I thought, well, what's an Australian, not saying that we would make a doco where the stars are the EPs, that would probably be against our guidelines, but what is a sort of a pop culture way into, or an arts and pop culture way into something that we've all got a cultural touch point with, but that can tell us something more about who we are. I mean, the Goods docos did that really well years ago, I think. We all lived through that, but we hadn't seen that perspective. So they're the sorts of stories that get me excited. And first person, very simple first person, so narratives. So we talked about, I was actually there, but One Day in America is a Nat Geo series that's not dissimilar. It sort of, again, hearing from people who've lived through things, and I think that's very affecting.
Kelrick, what's motivating you? What are you seeing that's catching your eye?
Look, slightly left of field for me. Like, I mean, absolutely, the content that we're seeing on our platforms, SBS, Stan, ABC, are very exciting, and it's great to see that quality coming through. I'm just really fascinated about the journey of audiences transitioning across or moving across into things like social media, YouTube, TikTok. It's like, what's the thing that catches people's attention? Is it the short form? Is it the variety of worlds that they get to visit? Is it the irreverence of it? Is it the respite that it provides from their everyday? I just wonder, what is it about those things that attracts people, and how can those things possibly apply to what it is that we do with our content making as well? How do we bring the spice, the secret spice that these platforms have to our content to create some engagement? Because, you know, inevitably we talk about it all the time, the descending number of audiences we see on our linear channels, and the struggle that we have with connecting with that audience. So I just wonder whether there's something to be learned from that. Yeah, I'll probably waste too much time on TikTok, to be honest with you.
Well, in looking at those, like, are you getting to any answers around that? Are you, as you look and see this behaviour and the way that people get into this kind of content, what do you bring back to the way you operate in terms of audiences and the habit with that?
Well, I think it's just about honesty, really, and particularly with our producers and projects that are coming in. It's like, there are so many alternatives now. There are so many different touch points. There are so many sources of information and story and content out there now, that when you're developing these ideas and you're coming to the commissioning editors and you're coming to us as broadcasters, think about those distractions. Think about, what are you up against? What's your competition for eyeballs out there? And I think that also includes social media as well. So, I mean, that's just my view, particularly in this First Nations space. And because there are so many young people in the Indigenous community here, they are there as a preference. That's where they want to be. They want to explore those platforms. They want to explore what it is to express themselves. And I think I had a conversation with someone else at the ABC about this recently, but it's like, because of the advent of social media, as factual storytellers, they've developed natural documentary abilities through social media. They film themselves every day. They broadcast their activities every day. They speak factual content better than we probably do. So how do you connect with them? How do you create something that attracts them? How can you leverage, well, not leverage, but, you know, how can you connect what they do with what we do as broadcasters? So I think they're interesting conversations.
I think, and maybe building on what you're saying, in a sort of a time-poor audience, I think clarity of proposition is, I mean, it's always important, but even more important. I think people need to know what they're in for very quickly, so that they can decide whether it's worth their time or not. So, and I think that's probably from a people who've grown up on social media as well.
I mean, I've been in this job for 7 years. People that were 15 when I started are now 22, right? So there's a generation out there that are speaking in this language naturally now.
I found, I went to the Trends session earlier with Dan, and one interesting thing that jumped out at me, he said, I wrote this down, where is it? That the BBC, where did I put it? BBC managed to maintain its under 35 audience online. I thought that bucked all the trends that the BBC in their online platform.
I think they were very early adopters of realising how important it was as a streaming. You know, how important the what is BBC, not iView, what's it called? iPlayer. How important the iPlayer was. I think they invested very early, very heavily in it. Had content that was premiering on that. I think they were ahead of the curve with it. I know it was really interesting hearing that. And I just wanted to add one other thing. Susie used the term dockbuster, and I think it's a term that's used more and more in the States. I think it's a really useful one for us to look at, because it actually gives us a bit of hope. Because the word dockbuster is about what can you have as a genuinely breakout show, which every single person here would want, that can be that channel-defining show. You know, I think every streaming network have had those that have then brought people to the network. And I think we are all here, I would probably say everyone would want a dockbuster that we want. So I think there is that ambition at the moment, and I think there is that opportunity. Are they easy to find? No. But I'm delighted to see that it is dockbusters that are leading that. So there is, unscripted shows that are leading that charge. It's not just a drama play that can be those big shows of the year.
We've got 21 minutes to go. Please shoot through your questions. I've got a few here. Amanda, you're first cab off the rank. Amanda, are there any specific feature documentary genres? ? So I guess what you're looking for.
In terms of what we're looking for, yes. So I think biopic, true crime, clearly, big issues, often journalist-led. You know, the upcoming projects that we've got, Malka Leifer, I'm sure everyone is across that case. Renee Gracie, who is a racing car driver, but also in the top 0.0001% of OnlyFans stars. And this is her return to racing. But a feminist essay about fast cars and racetracks. We've got Bri Bink, which is an international financial corruption story that ranges from Australia, Nick McKenzie getting sort of a cryptic message, sort of handwritten with block letters in a letter, leading him to clues that sort of uncovered a corruption scandal worth billions of dollars. And we've got a feature documentary about Barry Otto, directed by Gracie Otto, his daughter, and it's a very, beautiful, lovingly crafted portrait of a father from the daughter's point of view. And then How to Poison a Planet I've mentioned, and then also Killjoy, which is a very personal story of a young person who only realised in their teens that their father had murdered their mother, and they had been living under the roof of the father all that time. So, but there are actions. There's sort of advocacy amongst many of these titles, but there's also just beautifully crafted biopics. So honestly, it's not prescriptive what we're looking for, but if it's in those areas, we're absolutely interested. But also, we're always looking for the thing that we didn't even know we needed, but actually we absolutely want it. So we're completely open to being surprised and taking those risks.
How much do you all like to receive in terms of a pitch? Is it like a 1-page, 2-page, 4-page pitch deck, visuals? How far do you want to go? Conversations?
I think it depends on the project. Sometimes you do need that detail, and you need sort of clarification of access, or the range of inquiry. Other times, honestly, it can be that pitch that you get in the toilets at Spa. It can work. Although, no, I'm not encouraging it. But, that quick pitch can work.
Anyone else?
Obviously, if a one page is usually, unless it's something specific that we need to know. Obviously, if you have reel, it's a visual medium, and especially if you're pitching an ob doc, I think it's really hard for us to make an assessment based on paper alone, even if it's just shot on an iPhone. It doesn't have to be. I saw a pitch the other day. I won't go into detail but I was like, oh God, I didn't think I wanted that, but that's an incredible character. Looks like an insane world to go into. Whereas on paper, I wouldn't have. I'd been like, no, that's an easy pass. So just the power of getting us excited because of the things that you're excited. If that's visually, then that's great, without having to spend a lot of money too.
Yeah, I like a face-to-face. I like a chat. I like to see the enthusiasm on someone's face when they're pitching it. I like to see how they've thought about those things that are important to us: audience, tone, reach, all that sort of stuff. And it's cheap to have a chat. It doesn't cost you any money. But we've got just to dispel any sort of, assumptions, like very, very open for conversations at the ABC. We're very, very happy. Sorry, I don't want to speak for Suze, don't bombard her. But like for me, I'm very happy for people to just reach out with a phone call or an email and just set up a chat and just have that initial chat to just figure out if the idea is going to float for us or not. And if it is, then we can move forward with a one-pager and just, let's go slow. Let's take our time, just get it right.
Joseph, do you have a prescribed model of pitching, or are you pretty open to all forms?
I'm a bit demanding on certain things. I would say I love it. What I would give advice is, what we hate is a sort of 20-page opening pitch. What I would love is producers to have written that pitch and really thought it through, but then to condense it into 3 pages, so that all we have is that sort of short headline, but behind it there's a lot of work. I loved it recently where a producer who's not in the room now came in and bought a reel, and I felt genuinely moved. And I do just go, God, we're in this, bring us, if you really believe in an idea, do bring us something. because as soon as that emotion's provoked, then I'm engaged in a very different way from the kind of theoretical way that I've been engaged before. So I do love reels. I totally take there's time and there's money to that, and you have to be selective. But I think if you really believe in an idea, that's what can cut through on an emotional level.
Marissa?
Yeah, so similar to you too, Joseph. I love a reel, that connection to whoever the story has been told about or what the subject matter is. But I mean, first and foremost, just what is that story? Just give me that first top line of what it is. Face to face obviously is the best way, especially for First Nations, our mob. Just a conversation, so it's not too heavy or intimidating. Just an initial conversation. But then from there, then I'd like to see something in writing or a little reel.
I've got a great question here that talks to finance plans. What percentage of your commissions also rely on government funding, body assistance, versus independent funding? So, when you get a finance plan, and you start to see finance plans on your proposals and pitches, where are you seeing the money coming from producers in Australia?
Well, it's a combination of licence fee, possibly equity, where we're very active in trying to attract philanthropists into the finance plan, international, sometimes it's just state agency and Screen Australia. So there's no...
Mixed bag.
It's a mixed bag, yeah.
I'd say that's probably the same for all of us, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, same for us too.
Yep, great. Do you commission development?
Yes. Do you mean, do we put money into development? I'm guessing, yeah. Yeah, we do.
Maybe just talk us through that process.
Yeah, for sure. So, yes, we do. And so we don't put a lot of things into development at the ABC. We're really trying to be quite targeted. What we don't want is lots of you spending months and months and months off on tangents, making things that then you come back to us with and we don't want. So there's been a bit of streamlining of the process. So it can be a little bit harder to get that development money now, but when you get it, you know that it's 95% the case that you will go to commission. So it's not particularly speculative, but we would come in and sometimes bring in the agencies at that point as well, and then we do see development as a collaboration. It's not sort of here's your money, set and forget. Let's develop this together so that we get to the point where we have something that we know will work for our audiences.
And how involved do you get in that process? Do you just say, we'll see you in 3 months, or how much?
No, very, very, because, it's kind of as much on us as it is on you to make sure it'll work for our slate and for our audience. So there's regular check-ins and regular feedback, which you may like or you may not, depending on how it goes.
Joseph, and Marissa, do you commission development?
That's interesting. I hadn't realised that. No, we're quite different in that we, if we want to embrace risk, we know lots of things won't work. So we develop about twice as much as we can commission. And I hope, and please correct me if there's any producer I've ever misled, please correct me. We're very upfront of development money does not mean a commission. It's a kind of still probably about a 50-50 chance with that money. And the reason we do that is that we want to take risks, want to explore areas we haven't done before, we want to experiment. And I think if we're asking the producer to do that and to do that work, we need to kind of show that investment with them and genuinely pay for that. So we're really active in development. I think pretty early on it should be from us a clear no. If we're carrying on the conversation for a while, then it should quickly move into development. I think that's upon us to do so. But with the knowledge that development may well not. It's certainly not a 95% chance. It'll probably be just under 50% chance of them going to commission.
And Marissa?
I don't know, but Marissa.
Yeah, so for NITV, we're sort of similar in that way. We develop a lot more than we do commission, and we do jump into the development stage, sort of hands-on, and help kind of there's a collaborative process, help shape and mould those stories into what we think our audience would like to see. But in saying that, there are some of our stories that we do develop that don't make it to the green light and kind of go into commissioning from there because they're not quite what we wanted. I mean, we're heading in different directions.
And Amanda, since you are not a public broadcaster, do you operate differently in development? How do you work through development from your perspective?
Honestly, we don't develop that much in the documentary space, but I think if we're interested in a project, then we will actively work to get that commissioned. So development, as we all know, can go for years and years in the scripted area, and we're sort of probably developing more in that area, but there's a very, very high rate of green lighting to commissioning with the work that we have on the shortlist for factual.
I've got another question. The most popular Australian documentary in 2023 was a music documentary. Farnham, I assume. Yep. Where are we at in upcoming music documentary commissions?
Yeah, we are interested in these. We've got one. I don't know if it's been announced, so I better not say what it is. But we've got what I hope is a pretty epic.
Pick a band.
Feature doc. It's been in the work for a long time, so yeah, I mean, we would love more in that space. I think it can be highly competitive, that space, because having a name that everybody recognises and loves. Is going to be competitive, which is great news for you guys as producers. We've also got a series in the work that hasn't been announced that is largely told through music. It's about a social issue, but it's music is the forum in which we explore it. So yeah, very relevant to the ABC slate, definitely.
Anyone else want to jump in with a music response?
Love it. They always, often work more often than not, and it is competitive, especially depending on the generation, the soundtrack of which generation you're trying to get involved in. So, yep.
This is an interesting question. How significant is inclusion of a factual show on Gogglebox, and do you give them early access?
I'm a big fan of getting the show on Gogglebox. There's always the risk, of course, they might not like it. There was one brilliant show I was trying to remember where someone was like, oh, God, who would watch that? SBS, it's so boring. And then at the end of the show, they're like, oh, actually, that's quite a good show. I was like, yes, victory. We've got it with the Goggleboxers. I think it's a fantastic... I watch it just to keep up with what's on and what's going on. And yes, they get access about, a week before the show, whatever it is, that they get to view. But I'd certainly really encourage it. And I've definitely seen on demand, it's quite hard to sort of accurately go, but I have very strong suspicions that yes, it does lead to an uptick in some of the on-demand viewing. Someone else might have better, harder evidence than me, I don't know.
Yeah, no, same. I mean, we love it when our show, and sometimes it is, there's one episode recently of one of our science programs, and the audience were pretty damning, and it was actually really interesting to hear, and it's a reminder that audiences are more sophisticated than sometimes we sometimes we may give them credit for, and I sort of took that as very direct feedback, and when we were planning the next ones. But then also we had recently Pat Abood's doco, Gay Rabia, which is one of our Compass docos was on Gogglebox, and it was so moving, and it was an opportunity for the participants on Gogglebox to talk about their own coming out stories, and it was just incredible. And I'm sure there would have been a little bit of an uptick from that, and Better Date Than Never featured recently as well. And so I don't know, it's more of a marketing publicity thing as to whether they give them access early. I don't think they do, because I do think they have to keep it current with what's coming out on air, but I think it's a great publicity tool and a great feedback tool for us. And a great show.
I've kind of come to the end of my questions, so we've got 6 minutes to go. Are there any more questions from the floor? Have I covered all the...
Everyone wants a drink, don't they?
I know. Let's have our... Shall we go to final remarks, shall we? So let's go down the line. Final remarks. Anything I've missed, jump in and cover the ground, but I'll hand it over to you, Susie.
I'm really, I feel very excited about the future of the ABC, and I do want it to be the home of the best factual, in collaboration with everybody else here, the best factual content. I don't see a reason why we can't be the home of the documentary or the series that everybody's talking about, that gets international attention, that is sophisticated contemporary storytelling, that reaches a really broad audience and a younger audience. And I think that, it is good to think, maybe throw out your preconceptions about what is an ABC series or doco, and bring us things that you may not necessarily immediately think ABC is the first thought. I think it's an optimistic time, so please bring us your pictures in all the sort of subject matters we've been talking about today.
Just audience. Like, just don't take the audience for granted. Don't assume anything about the audience. Do the work. Find out who your audience is for your project, and make sure you're really clear about that when you have a chat to us.
I feel positive about things because actually, the John Farnham doc is a great example. There's Network 7 and theatrical getting, really broad audiences with that. I think that's encouraging for all of us. The fact that streamers are actually investing. I mean, I would love to see streamers investing more, obviously, in Unscripted. But I think, we're very much open for business. And I think if I keep on talking, I'll just repeat what I've said. So come and have a chat in the bar, which I'll be soon.
Likewise, we're excited for all of the stories, the First Nation stories coming off the back of the referendum, the stories that haven't been told that need to be told, but in fun and exciting ways. And how can you tell them? So we're open for business too. So come have a drink with me and have a picture and a chat.
I just want to say thanks to everyone who came and stayed.
What stamina, agree.
Yes, good on you. This is a really long session, but I hope it's been useful. Stan is absolutely out and proud in terms of all of the diverse Australian content that we are commissioning, and we look forward to continue building that slate, building the breadth of practitioners that we're working with. We're keen to work with new practitioners, not just the seasoned or the silverbacks. And absolutely elevated, global, all the words that have sort of been used over the last hour and a quarter. And I wish you all the best. And I remain optimistic. And while it's tough in the market, good stories will out. So best wishes to you, and see you in the bar.
Can I ask you all to give a round of applause and a thank you to our illustrious team? And thank you for the session. Go and enjoy the afternoon, and thank you to Screen Forever.